Recording in progress.
So Ty, if you can look it up on the share drive.
Is the cheat sheet?
Recording in progress.
Can you read that? Yeah, I can. All right, we meet today on settled indigenous land, which is traditional territory of the Chinookan peoples of the Wasco, Whitram, Warm Springs, and Grand Ronde tribes. Let us honor this land as traditional native stewards, past, present, and future, and strive today to embody a commitment of cultural equity and reconciliation, ecological conservation, and sustainability. In this spirit, I hereby call this meeting to order at 4:20 p.m. I don't see Tia, but is she online to take roll?
I'm here.
Okay, Tia, can you do a roll call, please?
Yes. We have Greg Pack, Chair.
Here, but late.
Megan Ramey, Vice Chair.
Here.
Daryl Roberts, Secretary.
Here.
Megan Larrabee.
Here.
Laura Dunn. Jeff Helfrich. And Letty Moretti. Okay.
All right, thank you very much. Next, agenda items number 3, approval of November 16th minutes. Has everybody had a chance to review?
Yes.
They're in everybody's packet. Are there any changes that board members would like to make? Not hearing any. Okay, can I get a motion to approve the minutes from the July 16th board meeting?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Daryl. Can I get a second?
Megan Larrabee, second.
Thank you, Megan. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
All right,
I
any,
do abstain.
okay, all opposed? Okay, chair votes aye. All right, number 4, do we have any public here?
We have one member plus our accounting.
Okay. I won't go through all the public comment rules, and if there's nobody here,
There is one person.
oh, there's one. Who's ever joining us here, do you wish to make a public comment?
I got a shaking of the head.
As yes?
No.
Okay, thank you. Okay, on to agenda item number 5, the financial audit. AJ Olson and Friend and Reagan is here to discuss the FY22 financial audit. AJ, please go ahead.
Happy to be here. I'm here with Angelo Sampson. He's a CPA on our staff. Him and I did most of the audit work together. I'm the partner responsible for signing the audit reports, but he did a lot of the work and communicated with Tia and Amy quite a bit during the audit process. You should have the financial statements and then a couple auditors reports on the side. I'm going to go over the financial statements first and kind of come back to the other reports at the end. And I'm going to try and kind of go through everything with a broad overview. So please let me know if you have any questions. Happy to go into anything in more detail if there's anything you guys are interested in. But for now, I'm going to start on page 5 for the independent auditors report. You guys want to flip to that? So this report talks about our responsibilities as auditors and your guys' responsibility or management's responsibility for the financial statements themselves. Just kind of want to point out our responsibility as auditors is to perform our audit testing, give an opinion on the financial statements, whether we believe they're fairly presented. And management is responsible for the form and content of the financial statements themselves. If you look at the top of this page, second paragraph under the opinion heading, that's where we give our opinion. And we gave a clean opinion, unmodified opinion, saying we believe the financial statements are fairly presented, which is exactly what you're looking for. And I'm gonna kind of skip around here, but please let me know if you have any questions as we go through, or we can come back to anything at the end. If you want
I
to-
will have a couple questions that,
Sure.
but we go ahead and,
You want to, or you can go through, if it's anything about the auditor's report, we can talk about it right now, or we can
it's at the end of your report, so go
Okay.
ahead.
Okay, sounds good. So if you want to flip to page 13. This is start of the basic financial statements, which is the statement of net position. So this is going to be similar to a balance sheet for a business. It's going to have your assets, your liabilities. The statement of net position is prepared on the full accrual basis, which means it's going to have all your long-term assets. And if you had long-term liabilities, they would be presented here as well. There's the basic financial statements are going to have government-wide financial statements, which this is part of the government-wide statements. It's also going to have fund statements. They're going to be slightly different based on different bases of accounting. The government-wide statements are on the full accrual basis, whereas the fund statements are on the modified accrual basis. The main difference is the government-wide is going to have all long-term assets and liabilities, whereas the fund statements are going to be only current assets and current liabilities. So if you look at the bottom, ending net position for the year was about 4.6 million. And that just means that that's how much assets exceeded liabilities in total on the full accrual basis. Moving on to the next page. This is the statement of activities, which is also going to be on the full accrual basis. If you see at the bottom, the ending net position of 4.6 million ties to the statement on the prior page. And this is where you're going to see total change in the year, which for this year, you guys had a decrease in total net position of close to 200,000, meaning total expenses outweighed total revenue by about 200,000 on the full accrual basis.
But a large part of that change is due to depreciation.
That's right. Yeah. So since this is the full accrual basis, you're going to have non-cash expenditures, which you're not going to see on your, budgetary reports, or I don't know for sure which reports you're getting in your board packets on a monthly basis, but for most entities, they're not going to include those kind of things. So yeah, it might be, different than what you're seeing day to day. Going on to the next page. This is the start of the fund statements, which is on the modified accrual basis. So this probably will look a little bit more familiar, but this is going to have only current assets, current liabilities. It's a balance sheet on the fund basis, so similar to what you're going to see for businesses with assets, liabilities. If you guys did have long-term debt, it would not be included here, and that's why you don't have capital assets here as well. Ending fund balance is about 1.5 million, which obviously is significantly less than the government-wide statement of net position. And almost all of that is just because of capital assets not being included here. Any questions about that so far? If you want to flip to page 17, so just 2 pages over. This is you're similar to an income statement, so it's going to be your revenue and expenses, but this time on the modified accrual basis. So this one's not going to have depreciation, as you mentioned. So on the modified accrual basis, you had a decrease of close to 15,000 in the current year. Any questions about that? You want to flip to page 19. This is the start of the notes to financial statements. This is kind of going to be the next 10 pages or so. Just kind of, this is where we talk about policies, accounting policies, and just give a little bit more background information on the financial statements themselves. There's a lot of important information here, but most of it doesn't really change year to year, so I'm not going to go over it too much. Unless there's any questions about anything specifically. But if not, we'll go ahead and move to page 29. Which is the budget to actual report for the general fund, which is you guys' only fund. So this is going to be pretty much exact same as the statement of revenues and expenditures on the fund statement report, but this time we're also including budgetary information and comparing actual revenue and expenses to the budget. One thing I do want to point out is if you look at the materials and services expense, you had actual expenses of 926,000, whereas budgeted was 891. So there's an over expenditure there of close to 35,000.
And is that the extra repairs we had to do, or is that?
Well, and it could be, there's a couple things we'll talk about when we get to the other auditors reports, but there were a couple journal entries we made during the audit. They were approved by Tia and Amy. But it could be that some of the expenses that were categorized in a different area, once we moved them, it might have threw you over budget. So you'd have to look at that. That could possibly be the case if you didn't notice an over expenditure until now, could have been due to an audit adjustment. But we can talk about what those changes were and why we moved them at the end. So this, like I said, this is just the same information as before, just including the budget numbers as well. Moving on to the end, page 31. This is another auditor's report. This one is on compliance with Oregon regulations. So this is where we would give any or report any non-compliance or Oregon violations that we found during the audit. We are not required to give an opinion on compliance, and so we don't give an opinion, but we do some testing as part of the Oregon rules, and anything that comes up during our audit testing that would be a violation of some of these Oregon statutes that are in bold in the middle here, that's where we would report those at the bottom. And kind of like I'd mentioned about the over expenditure, the first one is just related to that. There was the one over expenditure in materials and services. Flipping to the next page.
Oh, hold on a second. Can you explain number 3, where it says the district should be appropriating to organizational unit?
Yeah. So that's on the last page. I was going to go over number 2 and number 3, but for number 3, it's there's Oregon budget law requires appropriating by organizational unit or program. So you can do it in a more specific way, but it should be at least by organizational unit or program. So for a lot of people, if you have multiple funds, you might have a fund for a specific kind of program, and then that would be, you could appropriate by personal services, materials and services within that fund, and you're going to be covered because the fund as a whole is a program. But for you guys, since you guys have just the general fund, what I kind of recommend is appropriating by administration and transportation, because those are kind of, in my opinion, and I think, typically those are separate organizational units or programs. So kind of separating out administration versus transportation expenses. And then if you wanted to, you can still appropriate by personal services, materials and services capital outlay within administration and then within transportation. But even then, you don't really have to. You could just do administration, transportation, and then contingency. And that might.
What is the PS, MS, and CO?
So that's personal services, materials and services, and capital outlay. So
Okay.
that's how you guys are currently doing it.
Okay.
And like I said, you could do administration and then transportation, and then have those, subheadings under that. Or you could just appropriate materials and services, personnel services, capital outlay all together, and just like administration and then transportation. And sometimes that makes it a little easier just to prevent over expenditures, because the more specific you get, the more likely something's going to happen. It could throw you over budget. And then, yeah, so that was number 3. Number 2 was for the resolution for the 2022-23 fiscal year, adopting the 2022-23 budget. We noticed a negative contingency amount, which kind of doesn't really make sense. So should just be, what you're actually appropriating to spend versus having, a negative appropriation line item. So kind of most of the time when you see these organ, violations, it's typically budget. That's where, there's all the different rules related to budget. So that's kind of by far the most common type of things you're going to see there. Any questions about any of those? Or any questions about anything else related to the financial statements I kind of skipped over, or do you wanted me to go into any more detail? If
So,
not,
yeah, I guess, Adrian, I have a question, and sorry, I apologize for my ignorance. So you can't budget negative, but if you end up with the surplus or you're sitting good on cash or assets and you want to appropriate those in a different way, how do you go about that? In a budgeting process then?
yeah, so you could, you can budget contingency. It's just you can't budget a negative because really what you're doing when you pass an appropriation is this is how much we're planning to spend or that we're allowing ourselves to spend. So, if you're budgeting a negative, that's kind of, you're planning on somebody else giving you money, I guess, and for appropriation, you don't really talk about the revenue at all. Like the budget document itself is obviously going to have revenue, which is going to include your beginning fund balance that you haven't spent from prior years. And then expenses, and then whatever you're not planning on appropriate, so you're not planning on spending at all, that would be your planned ending fund balance. But the appropriation resolution itself is only going to have each line item you're appropriating. So it's not going to have any revenue, including beginning fund balance. It's also not going to have ending fund balance because you're not planning on spending it, so you wouldn't appropriate it. And kind of going back to your question, I guess, if you have revenue that's unexpected that you want to spend, then that's where you would do a supplemental budget. If you have, if you want to have some of that cushion, you could budget for contingency. So kind of depending on what you're looking to do, different methods for that, I guess.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions about the budget or the financial statements themselves, or do you guys want to move on to the other auditors' letters I had kind of mentioned earlier?
Good, moving on.
Okay, well, if there are no other questions, there should be 2 additional auditors' letters. One will be a 2-page letter. That one we call the significant deficiency letter. And then there's a 1-page letter that's the management comment letter. I'm going to go over the 2-page letter first. But I'll kind of explain the differences between the two. So a significant deficiency letter, those are where any deficiencies in internal control would be reported. It's kind of similar to the Oregon statutes letter, the Oregon auditors report. We're not required to give an opinion on internal control, but we do report any issues we find during the audit that we think are deficiency in internal control. So typically for our process, if there's a journal entry during the audit that we propose that's a material adjustment to, for you guys, your accounting software before we've started the audit testing, then we're going to almost automatically consider that a material weakness in internal controls, because, if we hadn't performed our audit testing and identified that, then, and you guys just prepared these financial statements on your own, then the financial statements would have been materially misstated. So it's kind of, and even, it doesn't necessarily have to be that we found an adjustment that changed the financial statements materially, or even an immaterial adjustment. There could just be, when we do our testing, we just see certain controls that aren't, I guess, what we would recommend, and we consider them a deficiency. But for you guys, we had, well, I guess kind of going back to that, there's this significant deficiency letter will be divided into material weaknesses and significant deficiencies. Material weakness is more severe than a significant deficiency, because a material weakness is something where there's real danger of the financial statements being materially misstated. if the controls are kind of strengthened. Whereas a significant deficiency is pretty much just a deficiency in internal control that's still significant enough to be reported in the significant deficiency letter, but not to the level of material weakness. And the management comment letter that kind of talked about, and I'm going to go over after this, those are less severe things than significant deficiencies. So they're going to be less than a material weakness or a significant deficiency. And a lot of times those are just kind of minor things we're trying to bring to your attention, or maybe recommendations we might have. But going back to the significant deficiency letter, we had a couple deficiencies I wanted to talk about. 2 material weaknesses and 1 significant deficiency. So the material weakness, first one is just related to accruals, and mostly grant accruals, making sure grants are accrued correctly in terms of accounts receivable and then revenue. And these should be kind of, when we do our audit testing, we're matching all the grant accounts receivable and revenue to reimbursement requests. So if there are grant expenditures that you guys incurred in the June 30, 2022 fiscal year, but you haven't been reimbursed for those yet, that you're expecting to get reimbursed, then you'd want to accrue accounts receivable for that money you're expecting to receive, and then accrue, revenue. That's the credit would be revenue, the debit would be accounts receivable. And we noticed a few different grants that weren't being set up correctly based on the reimbursement requests that we reviewed. Some of them were understated, some were overstated. It was just kind of looked like there wasn't a thorough review of the approved grants to kind of get everything tied to the reimbursement requests. So that was part of the issue. There was also an issue with payroll not being accrued, and this involved payroll that was paid in July, but for work performed in June. So that's where you'd want to accrue those expenses, since you guys are on the accrual basis. And those, the work that was performed happened before June 30, it needs to be expensed in the June 30 fiscal year end, and then accrued as a payable, since it wasn't paid before year end. So we kind of combined both those issues where we proposed audit adjustments to fix and into 1 material weakness about accruals. And that's kind of where we talk about here. When we send the journal entries, which I believe I don't know if you guys have already received it, but we usually mail a letter to the board on the conclusion of the audit that includes our journal entries we made during the audit. So you should see some of those that are hitting payroll and grants when you do get that to kind of review. And we went over all this with Amy and Tia last week, and just kind of explained what we found and where we're coming from with those adjustments, and got their approval to get those recorded in the financial statements. So everything in the financial statements themselves are all correct and accrued correctly. So yeah, I just want to make that clear. But that's for the first material weakness. Any questions about that particularly before I move on to the second one?
AJ, did you by chance know our history with that? Is this something that's ongoing for multiple years? Or just in this?
I didn't look too much at it from before, but from what I could tell, it looked like prior auditor had been testing that. So I think it had been done correctly in prior years, but it's, we did review prior auditor work papers a little bit, but we don't have his full information. So it's hard to tell everything that he had been doing. But I guess my assumption would be that it was done differently now than the past. I do know one thing is the grants themselves were a little bit more specific, whereas last year I think they were lumped together as a whole. I mean, I don't know if that's really relevant to them being accrued correctly, but it could show that maybe the process is slightly different than how it had been before. I don't know.
Yeah.
Any other questions related to that one? Well, moving on to second material weakness, and this one I talked to Tia and Amy about. Is kind of this one's kind of a fluke thing where just so happened that there was a payroll dated for July 1st. And so that should have all gone to payroll liabilities because it was the entire payroll was for June services. But what happened instead was it got recorded in QuickBooks as of June 30, as if the payroll had been paid on June 30 rather than July 1st. So what that means is that the expenses were recorded accurately. The problem was payroll liabilities were understated because it wasn't recorded as a payroll liability. And cash was understated because it had been listed as if it had already come out of the bank account when really it hadn't been paid until July 1st. So, you know, that's something where the income statement is going to be correct, but the balance sheet's going to be wrong. It's going to, and the net would still be correct, but cash would be understated and payroll liabilities would be understated by the exact same amount. And that's kind of, you know, I noticed doing payroll testing that it was pretty common for a payroll to be dated in QuickBooks one day earlier or later than what it was on the payroll reports. And most of the time it's not going to matter, but just in this case, when it's June 30 versus July 1, that's where you're going to run into those issues. And the reason, you know, it's important is because making sure that it's reported in the right quarter, you know, because you want to tie to the quarterly reports that are being reported. And also, you know, especially if this is going to happen on like 12/31 versus January 1st, you want to make sure your employees W-2s are right. And you know, that's probably not a concern because the payroll reports are, you know, you guys use a third-party service provider for the payroll report, so they're not necessarily connected with your accounting software, but you know, obviously just want to make sure everything's lining up and tying together. So that's kind of how we found that was when we were reviewing the quarterly reports compared to what was recorded in the accounting software. Any questions about that one? Okay, moving on to the last one. This is a significant deficiency, not a material weakness. And just one thing I want to point out is this is a very common one for our audit clients. We kind of just from our professional judgment, consider it a deficiency in internal control in and of itself if we're preparing the financial statements for you guys, rather than you guys preparing them, you know, management preparing them and then giving them to us to audit. Just because there's a danger potentially of, you know, management not, you know, reviewing thoroughly, for instance, if we're preparing the financial statements, or just, you know, there's just a little bit more room for I guess less management taking less responsibility for the financial statements themselves if they're not the ones preparing them. But this is, like I said, a very common deficiency because most of our clients don't have personnel with experience to prepare the financial statements. Kind of need experience with governmental accounting to do that, and you know, knowing GASBs and all the note disclosure, that kind of stuff. So it's a deficiency that nearly all our clients have, but we do still report it as a significant deficiency every year. And that's kind of, like I said, a common thing that we have for everybody. But any questions about that, or? So, and I kind of had mentioned this to Amy, is the security deficiency letter gets reported to Oregon Audit Division, and then they want the board to address the deficiencies within 30 days. Normally for all our clients that have, you know, financial statement preparation, they just say they don't have staff or the resources to hire an outside accountant to prepare financial statements and then a different accountant to review. So it's always going to be a significant deficiency. And then you essentially just kind of use that same description unless something changes, and you just, the board approves it every year, sends it off to the state, and that kind of responds to that deficiency. The two material weaknesses I mentioned, those are things obviously you'd want to get corrected for next year, so you could address the best way to do that, and then include that in the plan of action that gets submitted to the state. And then, you know, assuming you don't have any of those similar issues next year, then you should be in the clear with just the one significant deficiency related to financial statement preparation.
So Amy, is that something you guys are putting together now, the plan of action? And
Yeah,
Okay.
and then one piece of that, actually, AJ, do you mind describing a little bit about your suggestion about changing the accounting basis that would help avoid this in the
Yeah.
future?
Well, so, we've noticed it's pretty common with a lot of our audit clients, and I think just a lot of smaller municipalities in general of switching their accounting basis to from full GAAP, full accrual basis to modified cash, which essentially just means on modified cash, the government-wide statements are gonna be, in your case, pretty similar. There may not even be any change because you're still gonna have capital assets included, that kind of stuff. But then the fund statements are gonna be essentially on a pure cash basis, which means you're not gonna be accruing grants, you're not gonna be accruing payroll. You would just be cash in, cash out. It's a lot simpler accounting, and you don't have to, a lot of the issues we found had to do with accruals. It's something that, is a management decision and, it's, there, I guess, pros and cons either way, but if it kind of depending on if you as the board and if management doesn't feel that it's necessary to have full accruals for financial statement users, and tracking all that information on the full GAAP basis, it can make some of the reporting a little bit easier. One thing we kind of talked to Amy and Tia both about is, GASB's passing new pronouncements almost every year with kind of new requirements, changing how they do things. One that came into play this year is regarding leases. You guys didn't have any non-cancelable leases in the June 30, 2022 year, but it sounds like there will be some for 2023. So that's just, it's going to make it a little bit more complicated because according to the new GASB 87, you need to accrue a right to use asset, which is going to be similar to a capital assets, and then a lease liability, which is going to be kind of long-term debt. And it's a little complicated because depending on the lease agreement, I mean, there's various stipulations with it, but year to year, the right to use asset and the lease liability may not be the same. So I don't know. I get the leases is just one example of some of the complicated accounting pronouncements that are coming out. And why, I guess, it seems like it's more common for districts to be switching to modified cash versus full GAAP. There's, a couple of things you just have to be aware of if you are going to consider that in terms of federal awards, just making sure there's no stipulations that it would need to be full GAAP and, similar things like that. But otherwise, it's kind of up to the board and management if you think one basis of accounting is going to be, more beneficial for the district than another. And if that is a switch you guys wanted to make for next year, we would make a prior period adjustment to get beginning balances onto the modified cash basis. And then going forward, you would just record grants when you actually receive the cash. Expenditures would be recorded once the cash is actually paid. And you wouldn't have to worry about accruing, receivables and payables, that kind of thing.
So that's something that we're going to be bringing to the board at the January meeting for you all to discuss. And if that's the way that you would like to move forward, I think in theory, it would have helped us avoid both of these issues and just make our books accurate, but also a little clearer to understand. The other thing though, is because this would remove basically us stating on our financial statements how much we're expecting to be reimbursed on a monthly basis from ODOT, from our grants. So what we would do in order to ensure that you still have an understanding of how much money we can expect to be bringing in per grants is we would create another document that we would submit to you all with the financial statements that kind of states what we're expecting to draw down. It just wouldn't be in QuickBooks, so it wouldn't kind of cause potential accrual issues.
And I'm
So-
happy to answer any questions on the modified cash versus, full GAAP, if there are any.
Daryl, didn't you have some questions you wanted to ask at the end here?
Oh, we actually went through them.
Okay. And then
Well, and
I guess,
I was still gonna cover the management comment letter too, if there's no questions related to significant deficiency letter or anything about the, modified cash.
Oh,
Daryl?
well, I did have a question about the it said we would receive a copy of the journal entries, and I didn't see that in this report, but it sounds like you've yet to send them, or,
Yeah, well, we mailed it out. I think it probably Monday, so you may not have gotten it yet. I don't know. But I will email them. I may have already emailed them to Amy, but I can email them again and she can include those.
We'll make sure they're sent out.
So yeah, I guess moving to the one-page letter, the management comment letter, and like I said, these aren't anything that needs to be addressed with a plan of action. They're just smaller issues that we noted that just we wanted to point out. So the first one was a couple expenses that we moved, and you know, as I kind of had mentioned in the over expenditure, it could be related to some expenses that got moved based on just, you know, accuracy of the expense being accurately classified. So these two were trolley rent being reported as capital outlay, whereas since it's not really a capital purchase, shouldn't really be included as capital outlay expense, probably more materials and services. And then the second one was fuel that probably just accidentally got set into capital outlay, because that was definitely not something where it was consistent. Just, I think, one expense that was.
is there a page number that corresponds to this one-page letter you're talking about? Because I'm not seeing that in my material.
Yeah, there's no page number on it. It should be, I don't know, I'm not sure what your guys' board packets look like, but we had you know, the financial statements that had page numbers, and then the 2-page significant deficiency letter, and then there should have been a 1-page management comment letter. But I can.
Yeah, I'm not seeing that here in my material.
Daryl, I'll double check and make sure it gets sent out.
Yeah, and I can resend too if necessary, just let me know. But yeah, so you know, there's only two items we noted, and one was the trolley rent and fuel expense being recorded as capital outlay. The second one was beginning balance on the QuickBooks not matching the prior year audit. And we kind of talked about that with Amy and Tia a little bit, but it looks like part of the reason for that is because the QuickBooks seems to be somewhat of a hybrid between the government-wide statements and the fund statements. Most of the time, I see clients keep their QuickBooks on just the pure fund statements. So they wouldn't have capital assets on their QuickBooks at all, or long-term debt if you had it. But either way, you just need to, you know, as long as we have one method that's matching the financial statements, it'll kind of make it easier for us to compare, to just to make sure we're starting with good numbers, as in these balances as of July 1 or June 30 of the prior year match the audit, and then move forward to the, you know, the different audit procedures. But that's kind of a good practice to have, is make sure all numbers tie to the prior year audit, and then kind of lock those down so that you don't have any changes to prior year information. So yeah, those were really the only two for management comments. I don't know if you guys have that paper, but it's kind of, I mostly just went over them, you know, verbally. Any questions about either of those? Or any questions about anything else with the financial statements, any of the deficiency letter, modified cash, or anything at all? And I'll be happy to answer them.
I guess my question would be more for Teresa. You know, hearing this or looking at it, is there, I guess, an answer to this, or just misstatement, or is this how we've treated it in the past and it just hasn't been a different auditing firm seeing it differently?
Are you referring to the carry forward beginning balance numbers?
No, I was well, I guess we could talk about that, but no, I was referring to the other issues raised earlier.
So part of that is the change of tasks that I have, and introducing Tia to the process this year. So we need to maybe shore up our work in an effort not to overlap or overcharge you guys. I did not look at some of those things because Tia was doing it and we had been through the training process. In terms of the carry forward numbers, the prior auditor always gave us the journal entries at the end of the year. Some of the balances that you're talking about, AJ, I've had questions about for several years. I would love to clean those up and remove them like you're talking about. I can't find backup anywhere to substantiate what they are. So, I mean, they're big numbers and significant numbers. I could never get answers as to what they meant. So, I think those are positive suggestions that will be good. The rest of it is process, training and shoring up so that we're reviewing properly, but not overlapping on too much double work.
I think just to add to that specifically for the accrual issues, where the grants were placed in the wrong, the line items. I think that has to go back to how we label our different line items in QuickBooks and making sure that they clearly line up with the grants that we have, just the line numbers and the agreements that we have with ODOT. And then just being very clear, and I think double checking and rechecking when the reimbursements come in, that they're being attributed to the right line items, because grants are very confusing. We have several grants, they have very similar reasons. And so I think it's just really making sure that we do that double check to make sure that when those reimbursements come in, they're the right ones. But if the board does decide to stick with the accrual method, making sure that the accruals are accrued to the right line items, and then again, making sure the reconciliation are. So there's kind of two-part process there. But the big issues, I think, are just making our books very clear and our processes very clear, so that it's very easy for someone to go in and be like, yes, this money is attributed to this grant, we have received it, and it's nice and understandable and accurate.
Okay, thanks, Teresa. I was just trying to understand.
I get it.
All right, AJ, anything else?
I don't think so, unless there are any other questions. Kind of went over it there. And you know, once you guys have had a chance to review any journal entries or the management comment letter, I'm happy to answer any additional questions you might have. Via email or a phone call, whatever.
Okay. There's no approving the audit, the board has to accept it.
Yeah, we need to approve it. So we need a motion.
Daryl, do you have any concerns before you approve? Is there anything else you're still waiting to see?
Well, I'd kind of like to see that other
letter
letter that I didn't get. But,
yeah,
you know, it doesn't sound like there's any huge discrepancies here that are a problem, so.
okay. So that letter is not material in your decision to.
And I would like to see the year-end journal entries, just to know what what the size of some of these issues were. But I don't have a problem with the work that they've done, no.
Okay. Okay,
I can make the motion to approve the audit.
okay, I have a motion on the floor. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, any further discussion? Okay, I'll put it to a vote. All in favor, accepting the audit?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, chair votes aye. Guess I should say any opposed, but everybody voted aye there, so all good. All right, thank you, AJ.
Yep, thank you.
Appreciate it. Okay, now on to agenda item number 6, the Gorge Regional Transit Strategy presentation. Kathy with McKett is here, and Kathy, the floor is yours.
Okay, thanks so much. Let me get my
You want me to describe you one, or if you will?
camera on. Oh, gosh. Okay. Yeah, sorry, that's the old Clickitat one. Amy, can I share my screen?
Yes, please do.
Great, it's really the same presentation. Hang on, I'm trying to find my camera. Here we go. Okay, here we are. Great. Okay. Oh, let's see. I need to get permission to share.
Oh, sorry, I can do that.
I think Amy wanted to do it just to keep clicking fast to move you through fast.
Yeah. Yeah, but I realized that the that presentation, yeah, was directed for Clickitat County. So didn't want you guys to think we were just cutting and pasting, which we, you know, we have done a bit. Okay, Amy, are you ready? Yes. Okay, great. Here we go.
I'm sorry, I need to pop out the back.
Okay, and I'll just wait. Amy, do you want me to, sorry, let's see. Trying to talk and do the slideshow at the same time. Should I wait? Amy, do you?
You're good, you're good.
I'll be back in 2 minutes.
Okay, awesome, great. Okay, so hi, I'm Kathy Fitzpatrick. For those of you who don't know me, I'm the Regional Mobility Manager. I work for the Mid-Columbia Economic Development District, and I am staff for the Gorge TransLink Alliance, which the Columbia Area Transit is a member of. The Gorge Transit Alliance has been, TransLink Alliance has been a partnership since 2001. And in 2010, there were formal agreements between the counties to make more formal the alliance. And the Gorge Regional Transit Strategy is really a is really the kind of a culmination of all of your years of work hard to create a real regional system. I mean, just in the last few years, you know, we finally had a true interconnected regional public transit system. And so this is what we're doing now is really working together to figure out what our regional vision is and our goals, which is what we've done in phase 1. So of this process, we work together with many of our many of the county, the 5 county elected, so county commissioners and city elected leaders and staff. We worked with federal agencies, with our state agencies on both sides of the river. We worked with the private sector and of course, healthcare organizations and nonprofit organizations to craft a common collective vision for public transit. And I'll just read it really quickly for you all. Public transit supports thriving Columbia River Gorge communities by providing access to critical services, higher education, jobs, outdoor recreation, while protecting the natural wonders of the gorge. So in other words, you know, all of these stakeholders, these diverse stakeholders came together and they said, we want public transit to help us solve our housing affordability issues. We want public transit to help solve our congestion issues. We want public transportation to help us solve our getting employees to work issues. So we put that all in this statement. And then of course, our goal areas are community and economic vitality, high quality service and experience. So looking from the rider's perspective, environmental stewardship and financial sustainability, which is, you know, sort of the underpinning of it all. And if you want more information on this first phase of the process, you can go to the gorgetranslink.com and under the Gorge Transit Strategy, you will see you'll see this great final report that we did for phase 1 that covers exactly how we work together to craft the vision and goals. So the second phase is basically what we've done is hired consultants to help us operationalize the vision the goals. So what they're trying to do is figure out, well, okay, you've got this great vision and goals. What are the nuts and bolts of how you get there? How are you going to achieve them? So so we have a bi-state project management team with our great consultants, a consultant team formed of plan engineering, Carol Richardson, who's done so much work for both Oregon and Washington transit agencies. She's based in Spokane. JLA Public Involvement, Echo Northwest, who has been working with you all as well in your planning process, and then Kittleson is the main consultant. Our advisory committee is by state as well, representation with, of course, the transit providers. First and foremost, the staff for transit providers. The stakeholder advisory group is the same group that we have, that we started with. However, they have less of a real front and center role. They're not being tasked with crafting the vision and goals, but they are being tasked with helping us make sure that the consultant is going in the right direction and that we are all going in the right direction. So phase 2, you can see where we are in December. I'm here and I've been presenting to all of the different decision makers, whether that's a county court, county commissioners, or in your case, transit district board. We'll have a draft strategy in April with revised transit strategy in June and a final in July. And in between then we'll have more advisory committee meetings, we'll have a key initiatives workshop in January that will be really informative, and hopefully you will be able to guide your representative this evening. With input, with your own input for that. Hopefully you've all read memo number 5. So operationalizing the vision, there's really kind of 3 focus areas for how we're doing that. So one is just the practical nuts and bolts, like how many, if we're serving the I-84 corridor, how many trips a day are we thinking is sufficient? So and how are we going to, what's more important to coordinate our schedules, or to, let's say, brand our buses, that sort of thing. So really looking at the nuts and bolts, what's really important to us, and prioritizing those. The second main focus area is looking at organizational structures. Now, what our consultants have told us is that it would be very difficult for us to achieve our vision if we continue the way we are, which is, on a staff level, coordination on a staff level. We really need to bump it up to so that decision makers are together in a room, making those decisions about the regional transit system. And I'm not talking about your county's public transportation system. I'm talking about the regional system and how it coordinates. So we looked at a lot of different types of organizational structures, and we'll look at that real briefly, and hopefully you were able to dive into that when you read memo 5. And then, of course, the financial opportunities, those that come with each, there are different financial opportunities that come with each type of organizational structure. So this is just, kind of a smattering of those nuts and bolts that I'm talking about. A lot of these things can be done on the staff level. And we are actually, accomplishing some of these, achieving some of these. Some of these, may take more push and support from our decision makers. We put together, the consultants put together a vision map with all of our input. So between the advisory committee and the stakeholder advisory group, this is what we've come up with, and it's really based on grounded and does not conflict with your own local planning processes. So we really wanted to make sure that this whole process is built on local plans And so any community outreach that you've done, that is being incorporated into this process as well. So when we start talking about decision-making organizational structures, so there's kind of quite a few from scenario 0, which is status quo, to scenario 5, which is a bi-state governmental agency. And they all come with their various advantages and disadvantages. What the consultants have advised us, and this is what we ask them to do, is make recommendations. They really feel that pulling together the decision makers into some kind of organization or some kind of regional transit advisory board is the next step to be able to achieve the goals and the vision that we've set. So it would be a first step to any of the other numbered scenarios. So anything past 2, you need to have a 2 first. You need to have the decision makers in the room saying, yeah, we want to form a bi-state governmental agency. So that's the recommendation from the consultants. And what the workshop will be about is getting your input on what you think about that, and starting a little bit. There's a lot of concerns about, well, what about local control? What do we gain? What do we lose? And those are the types of things that we can start to talk about. I think in the implementation phase, there will be a lot more conversation about what a regional transportation advisory board, what authority they have, what authority they don't have, that sort of thing. So devil's in the details, and that would be worked out with the decision makers themselves. So talking about funding opportunities, as you can see, they're really linked to the type of organization. So if we have an enhanced status quo, you can see that our funding opportunities aren't much more than what we've got now. If you go to a bi-state governmental agency, of course, then you get, you've got more opportunities for funding that we don't have currently. So that's also spelled out more in memo 5. And so I really encourage you to, kind of dive into that if you have not yet. So our stakeholder interviews, some of you were part of those interviews. You might be interested in going to thegorgetranslink.com and looking at the overview of those interviews. I have sent that to, that was sent to Amy, so she can also send that to you directly if you want that overview of what mostly it was decision makers or a lot of elected leaders. So whether it was elected leaders from cities or staff, some staff. And then of course there we always asked staff from the transit provider to be there as well. So again, I think there was great enthusiasm from every single county who sent a representative to be interviewed. There was some concern about losing their voice, the smaller communities losing their voice in, sort of the larger, larger population areas, getting kind of all the love, and maybe those smaller communities not getting so much attention. If we do, really try to regionalize the system. So that's a real, so that's something to really keep in mind and make sure that we're mitigating for. Economy of scale, I think everybody got it, like efficiencies, economy of scale. Oh my gosh, this would just be so much better, taking the, really increasing the capacity of those smaller agencies that are doing other things, like they're doing senior yoga and senior meals, and they are doing home health. And they're also trying to run a transit system. So, really trying to, trying to spread the love, with resources and capacity and staff expertise and experience. So, and ultimately, everyone agreed, we need to increase our ridership, and we want to get cars off the road. So that was awesome. I'd love to hear that from our county commissioners. So next steps, we have the key initiatives workshop coming up January 9th, and then a lot more meetings with our stakeholder group, our advisory committee, of course. We've got the revised transit strategy, and then in July, I'll be coming back with a governmental presentation to everyone to give you the final results. And so hopefully, Amy, is there time for questions, or do you want to take over and lead the conversation in getting input for Greg when he attends the workshop?
Yes, so, and I'm not sure if we've actually designated you as the person to go to the January workshop.
Fine, look surprised.
But we do need one board member to go to the workshop in January. We do have to be very careful because we can't have more than 3, because then we have a quorum issue. But if 3 people would like to go, that is okay. But my thought is that I really do want the board members to kind of be on the same page. And I stated this in my memo in the board meeting materials. So I would like the 3 people or 1 person who does go to the workshop to have a general idea or understanding of how the board members would like to move forward if there was a government structure change. As well as understanding, at least from staff, of what we think is required in order for it to be worth it for us to make a governmental change or governmental structure change. So I laid them out in the different I laid the different scenarios that I thought were kind of the most beneficial for the agency in the memo. The ones being for a short-term basis, enhanced status quo, or scenario 2, the Regional Transit Advisory Board at a kind of more a midterm potential, depending on how easily that is able to come together. I think the one thing to kind of be aware of with the advisory board is just we'd have to make sure it's very clear as to where, if there were decisions being made at the tab level, that it doesn't, if there is a conflict of thought by the CAT board, and the CAT board would have would be able to kind of overrule it for Hood River County Transportation District specifically. And then scenario 3A for joint districting perhaps, although based on the consultant's review, that sounds like a very challenging thing to potentially do. However, I think there might be some potential other options with that, but that's something I need to talk to Kathy about. And then scenario 5, the new bi-state government agency. I don't think scenario 4 makes a lot of financial sense for us, as we are already a transportation district and we have that funding coming into us already. But those would be long-term. So anyways, yes, I would like to open it up to the board to discuss. If you feel comfortable to kind of give an idea of how you think the board members representing CAT who go to the stakeholder should provide feedback.
So
When in January, by the way?
I believe it was, I'm sorry, Kathy. I'm
Kathy, when in
forgetting.
January is the stakeholder meeting?
January 9th.
Okay.
10 to 12, January 9th.
And I will forward that, the invite as well as the final information for that, whoever wants to go.
I don't know, I was reading that the second option was something that I don't know, it seemed to be like the more favorable one, but
The Regional Transit Advisory Board.
yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know, but
I think the great thing about that is that it would allow for more community input as to how the regional services should be grown.
okay. And who would be the rep?
So that's up to you guys to decide. I just cannot go above 3.
No, I mean, sorry, the second option is called what exactly again?
So there's, well, I guess it kind of scenario one was the enhanced status quo.
Mhm.
And then scenario two is the Regional Transit Advisory Board. So that's where there would be from each transit provider at county,
Mhm.
they would select people to be on the board.
Yeah,
And then there would be the option to either give them decision-making capabilities or not.
mhm.
And if decision-making authorities were granted, then that's just where I would say we'd really have to be very clear.
You asked me to stop you during this section if you're going over time.
Okay.
You started over time, so I wasn't sure where to stop you at.
Yeah. So I think is this something that the board feels like they can discuss and have a general understanding of how to move forward? Or if you feel like you do have a general understanding of how the board wants to move forward?
I don't know what we do now. No, I
Yeah.
think there's a lot more discussion needs to have happen. It sounds like we need to assign a rep to go to the January 9th meeting. Do we have anybody that has interest and wants to be involved in that?
Yeah, it's a big day for me.
All right, so it's me. So I need to get educated on that. More, I've read through summary. I haven't gone into a lot of detail.
I feel like we can set up a meeting and we
Yeah, I
can go
think
through
you
it
and I
then.
need to set up the meeting and be aligned on it.
Okay,
Kathy, you can put me down on for that, and I really appreciate you spending time letting us know where you're at in the process. And there was also something in April I saw on your timeline, but I didn't see it on the last slide, right? Didn't you say April was a,
I'm sorry, that April was,
you had some other kind of commitment date in April or a phase to be done in April, but I didn't see it on that last timeline.
oh,
read it
the
wrong?
revised, yeah, so we'll have revised versions before the final in July.
But there's no set meeting to look over the revised stuff, or is that just something?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. So the advisory committee and the stakeholder advisory group, and you are all welcome to join the stakeholder advisory group. I mean, being careful that you're not there with a quorum, but yeah, for phase one, I think there was good participation from the CAP board, and would love to have you join us. And Amy can, for anybody who's interested, Amy can send those invitations on, or I can do that for you as well. And you can get caught up by just, looking through really, you'll get caught up by reading through memo 5, which you have.
Okay, a lot of times in these meetings, it's the people that don't show up that we assign those tasks to. So what we gotta make,
Letty and Laura.
Okay. Thank you, Kathy, appreciate it. Okay.
Thank you.
We are on to agenda item number 7, correct?
Yes, 7-8.
Okay, Amy, please go ahead.
Okay, so in your board packet, I have included the STIF project plan that was recommended by the STIF advice, so the Statewide Transportation Improvement Fund Advisory Committee. We had 2 meetings this past fall and winter. Or I think the first was in November and second was in December. But they have recommended a list of projects as well as the priority level for those projects to the board for approval. In order for us to submit our STIF plan, which funds the majority of our services, we do need the board to approve what was included. Are there any questions based on what was sent out?
Seeing any?
I think probably the main thing to point out is that a large amount of these projects are similar to what we had in our last biennium. I did add quite a bit more funds to the maintain existing services in order to ensure that we can do match as well as help with expenses that may increase, which whether it's fueling or employees. We did also add van pool and mobility services, which will allow us to enact some of the things that are going to be in our draft transit master plan. So as opportunities arise, whether it is to put in a mobility hub or a bike share station, et cetera, this would allow us to do that. And then we also have added a program reserve. So again, that helps us cover an unanticipated costs for maintaining existing services and match funds for capital grants. So if we get actually get our vehicles, or if we find some more grants that require match for vehicles, it allows us to have that capital in there, or those funds to cover that. And then we do, yeah.
My laptop died. Remind me what the number, the finance is for the mobility services.
So the mobility services, I have 20,000 for each year, so a total of 40,000.
Okay.
The other thing to know is that all of this allocation is based on a number that is 150% of what ODOT economists are foreseeing that we will receive through these funds. They give us a forecasted amount, which we will get. But the recommendation was that we actually go above that and approve an allocation of a greater percentage. Because if there happens to be more funds available, then we can use those funds. But if we allocate at a lower percentage, we do not have access to those funds.
Okay.
So that is something to know. We will, of course, make our service planning based on what we actually receive. And we
Don't go over budget.
won't go over budget,
Did
or we'll try our very best.
ODOT recommend using the term bike share, or is that us?
That's us.
I would say bike library is more appropriate for $20,000,
Okay,
because bike share is like upwards of $500,000.
okay.
Yeah,
Is there maybe a more vague term that I can use that would cover just about anything? You can think on that and let me know.
yeah. Yeah, bike library is like the lean startup, low capital investment.
Yeah.
E-bike share or a bike share.
Sounds good.
Okay, so do we need a motion to approve the STIP plan?
We do need a motion to approve this thing.
I'll make the motion to approve the STIP funding.
Okay, I have a motion. Can we get a second?
A second. Megan, seconds.
Thank you, Megan. Any further discussion? I guess I do, it calls out for this to be then approved in the January meeting as well.
No, so in the January meeting, we'll be approving the 53 and 50, or sorry, 5310 and 5311.
Okay.
So originally we were going to just approve the STIF plan as well as 5310 and 5311. But because we had so many presentations today, I tried to slim it down as much as possible. And I was able to push those other two to January.
Okay, perfect. Any further discussion? All right, call for a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, any opposed? Chair votes aye. Passes. Okay, approved transfer of to the county account.
Yep.
7B.
Tia, are you there? Tia, are you available to go over that? Okay. All right, so basically what we are doing is we have received our county funds, or sorry, the property taxes for this past year. And we would like to move those funds over, as well as an additional amount for to ensure that we have enough match funds available and just funds available in general to purchase 2 vehicles that looks like we're going to be purchasing in the next couple months. So we need those extra funds in order to pay the upfront cost, and then we get reimbursed by ODA. And I believe the final number was 450,000.
And this is different than normal because
So this is different than normal because in the past, we had, I think it was in 2019, Patty had asked to move over a significant amount for the last time we purchased buses. But also, just moving forward, I would like it to, just as we get the property taxes, it's just best practice to move it over so we have easy access to it.
Yeah.
Because right now it's in the county account, we don't
Yeah.
have access for it, and that's what we pay our match for.
Property taxes years, 300,000 a year?
Yeah, it's, oh gosh, I think it's just under 300,000.
Okay.
I don't have any issues there.
Yeah.
Okay, can we get a motion?
I'll make the motion to transfer the funds.
Thank you, Daryl.
And
Second.
specifically
Megan?
approved 450.
Yeah, specifically 450 as requested in the memo. Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor?
I,
Aye.
Aye.
Any contrary minded? Okay, chair votes aye.
I think that's
On
my
to-
favorite term for that.
Hey, just like to switch it up, you know, you can't always go with the same thing. Winter close stipend.
All right, and so that would, and Tia, you aren't by chance available now? Okay, I'll just move forward.
I can do that one if you want.
Sure, why don't you ask?
So we're asking for $100 winter close stipend for our Gorge to
I
Mountain
am,
drivers.
can you hear me?
Oh, now Tia's back.
Yes, we can hear you.
You hear me? Okay, sorry.
Tia, do you want to
Okay,
take back over?
I'll take over. Did you start that portion yet?
Yes, go ahead and describe the ask.
So in the packet, you guys have a memo that I provided for the winter clothing reimbursement for our Gorge to Mountain drivers. So we have started operating the Gorge to Mountain service. With this route, our drivers have just a higher potential of being out in the weather to chain up or whatever may come with being, up on the mountain. And it's a little cold and the weather's a little different than our normal routes. So what we're asking the board is for permission to provide $100, up to $100 reimbursement for those drivers to assist them with purchasing like winter clothing or boots. And how they would do that is they would bring in a receipt to submit for reimbursement.
And I've already heard this request, so we talked about it in the agenda, and in my business, we do that all over the board. Some people, we give them 1,000 or 800, because boots, to have 100 boots is $400 for some people,
Yeah.
or 500, or even good quality cheap boots for driving is still 150, 200. So personally, I'm in full support of this, because I know
Yeah.
what we put people through to deal with the elements, so.
there's no such thing.
Yeah, I
as
thought 100 was kind of
Yeah.
low.
that. I'll make the motion to approve this.
Okay. So we have a motion to approve the $100. Do I have a second?
Well, second.
Okay, Daryl, any further discussion? Okay. Let's take a vote. All those in favor?
I,
Aye.
Aye.
Any contrary minded?
Hmm.
All right, chair votes aye. Thank you. I'm glad you guys brought that to us so we can take care of our team. All right, we're now on to the operations manager report.
Perfect. I
You're
will
you're a
run,
half hour behind.
I'll run through real quick because we're late. 28 minutes so far. Our safety score, we had 0 crashes, safety score greatly increased. We have alleviated all issues with the Samsara boxes, so we're down to 4 reported events. They're reviewed, none of them were determined to be our drivers at fault for anything. Harsh drive time was down a little bit because we had a couple days that we were closed during November due to weather and holidays. Our miles driven was down as well. On-time performance was slightly increased, right on par with where we've been for fixed route, and slightly increased for dial ride. down a little bit on the 5-minute on-time performance. But for dialogue, we use a half an hour window. Our fuel usage, our gas was up. And our cost was down a little bit. So we ran more gas vehicles than diesel ones during November. That made our cost per mile drop back down. Our employee of the month this month is, or I guess it's last month, we do a rolling thing, is Dan Devers. He is our longest tenured employee, period. He's been here for 14 years. I should have known this. 14 or 15 years.
It's been here a while.
He's
Yeah,
our
he's the
only,
oldest.
he's our only part-time driver. And we've had quite a few drivers out sick and on leave for the holidays, and he's been filling in nonstop, so.
And his wife makes kick-ass jello,
Yeah.
Western style.
Yeah, and he's just great, positive overall person. Any questions on that, or I'll run through the ridership real quick as well. So ridership compared to last November is up across the board. We are dropping slightly on a couple of things compared to October, but that's generally just our winter decline. I did get a call from a driver at the beginning of this meeting that we have had our first 100% full bus for Gorge Mountain, and he had to turn some people away.
Awesome.
yeah.
Oh, well, that's kind of sad.
I know. Kind of sad, but.
People.
Well,
Oh,
it was,
we
it
have
was
another-
going up, right?
He was coming down. There was another one 20 minutes later.
Oh.
So they only have
Cool.
20 minutes.
Oh,
Yeah. Our overall, just to give the overall, we're at 3.7 rides per hour. Last year, at this point, we were at just above 3.
All right, any questions for Ty on the manager's report? Okay, Amy, we'll go to the executive director report.
Wonderful, thank you. And before I do get started, is there anyone with a hard stop time where they must leave?
I should have left already, but timekeeper.
Oh,
But
well, I ask because I do need approval. So if anybody needs to leave, then.
Can we do the approval first, or what do you got to present?
So I'm discussing the proposed 10-year plan for the different service options for the transit master plan. I did include the memo in everybody's packet. And so I can do my best to kind of blow through it as quickly as possible. But I'm essentially asking the board if they feel comfortable with our proposed options that we've presented, or if they recommend changes, or they're not happy at all, basically.
And this could be pushed back to January if needed.
Potentially, but we do need the board's approval to kind of move forward so that we can start working on the fiscal plan as well, or the financial plan, as well as vehicle plan as well. So if it's something that you guys feel comfortable, I'll go ahead and move forward. Otherwise, we can push back till January.
you can go ahead.
Okay. Megan and Daryl, are you guys okay?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yes.
Okay, I will blow through as much as I can. All right. All right, everybody can see my screen? Well, except for you guys.
Yeah, I never get this. How you make them both happen. Yeah, this is always my issue. It's like, instead of show screen, you show tab or something.
Yeah, I had to show. It's not having problems. Here we go.
Hmm.
All right, so basically we created different scenarios for the different focus areas. And we went out to the community to look at what their preferences would be. And we developed these scenarios by taking from the community input provided in survey 1, as well as operational concerns that our staff has highlighted. The one thing I do want to make sure that everybody understands is that with both surveys, we got about 30% of our respondents were Spanish speaking, which is amazing. We really did take a lot of care to ensure that the responses we received from both survey 1 and survey 2, we went to vulnerable populations and worked with our members or our partners to get those responses. So we conducted over 50 targeted outreach events, meetings, tabling sessions, et cetera, et cetera. Some of the meetings included the Gorge Native American Collective meeting. We went to different packing houses. We went to Mercado Guadalajara. We also did outreach in Cascade Locks and City of Hood River too. So for survey number 2, where they actually chose the different options that they would prefer, 229 total respondents, 28% were non-white, and 75% were between ages of 25 and 64. So for Cascade Locks, the survey respondents overwhelmingly chose option 1, the formalized local deviated fixed route. That is fairly similar to what we have today. I think it is important to note that we have very low ridership as of now, even though the majority of respondents wanted this option. So what I think it really highlights to us is that moving forward, we need to do more additional outreach to really figure out what the end result is that is needed for Cascade Locks. But the choice was the option 1. So for Hood River East, the majority of folks, they were kind of split between options 1 and 2. Slightly more respondents believed option 2, which was the linear route, would allow for increased frequency and improve access to downtown. So specifically, that's where everything kind of gets split out. So you have the linear route, so a traditional bus route in Hood River East, and then you have another one in Hood River West. And Hood River West, slightly more options believed in option 2, which was the West Side Rural Access, which offered greater mobility and access to Hood River, which was really interesting. All right, and so for Odell and Lower Highway 35, the majority of respondents liked option 2, which was the fixed route with shared mobility services. So that removes the deviated option for the Upper Valley route, which is what we have now, to ensure that it's a more dependable route and allows for quicker access. And then Parkdale and Upper Highway, most of the respondents preferred option 1, which was the fixed route with shared mobility services and mobility hubs. However, we do need to note that I don't think a lot of people really understood the Parkdale options, as it was fairly confusing. I think we did.
Yes, I would agree with that.
We spent many hours trying to make it as least confusing as possible, so that should be noted, but it was confusing, and several people stated it that they were confused on the options. So using that information, staff is recommending that we implement a start with option 1 and deviate the Highway 35 into Parkdale in the morning and afternoon inbound trips to the mountain. And again, that's going to depend on year-round funding for Gorge to Mountain Express. So for the regional routes, and I'm sorry, just to be clear, I think for going back to City of Hood River East and West, what we have decided to do is we'll do a interim route where we have the current circulator route. And sorry, I don't think I actually should have explained it a little better. So what we're going to do, we're going to have an interim route that allows us to have our current circulator route, and then we have a AM and a PM kind of commute express time where we have a linear route that goes right between downtown and the Heights.
Oh, good.
Yes, and then with the expectation that in about 3 to 5 years, we'll implement both the east linear route and the west linear route. But having that interim route not only allows us to address the real need that right now the city route is not usable to all users who have specific use cases. So it would increase that usability, but also it will train folks in Hood River to understand what a traditional linear route is. And then that'll be a stepping stone to having separate east and west linear routes.
Yeah.
And the reason, and so for Hood River West, while the more popular route was the western, where it goes out into the less developed areas, that wouldn't serve very many people right now. I think that would be in 10 years, make a lot of sense because you're going to see a lot of development there. But in the next 3 to 5 years, it makes more sense to go kind of in between. So right here, it's kind of hard to see. And then have a future goal of then hitting those less developed areas as time goes on. Okay. And then with Odell, sorry, as I mentioned, the more popular route was the fixed route, which we are going to move forward with, but then also have a deviated route that kind of goes between Odell and Parkdale. However, we can be flexible with that, so that could be also a more mobility services option. We're trying to make sure that we're not leaving those folks who do depend on the deviated fixed route for services in D and the Parkdale area, especially since we don't have the current flat funding yet to do year round. All right, so for regional routes, as survey respondents were asked to weigh in on different potential stops that we should add. The several other stops that were mentioned, including Starvation Creek State Park and Portland Airport, Rooster Rock, Eagle Creek, or Lewis and Clark State Park, as well as Eagle Creek, Horsetail Falls, and Eagle Creek Trailhead. And in addition, so the ones that we propose are Bonneville, Viento, and other. So the ones for Gorge to Mountain, the ones that we had proposed were Pine Grove, Pulaski Trailhead and Cooper Spur, and Sherman Campground and Tomwatz Falls, and then other. Of those different 3 ones, Pulaski Trailhead and Cooper Spur, as well as Sherman Campground and Tomwatz Falls, were the ones that were chosen, where we got a higher list of respondents who chose that one.
So sorry, what was the last one? Pulaski, Cooper Spur?
Pulaski Trailhead and Cooper Spur, and Sherman Campground and Tomwatz Falls.
Sorry, Pulaski and Cooper Spur is one of the same?
Yes,
Okay, and I was like confused at how they were gonna get to.
no,
Okay.
we wouldn't actually go to.
Yeah. And this is for summer?
So this would be for when we go year round for Gorge to Mountain, so it'd
Yeah.
be summer and winter. However, if it doesn't make sense to be going to some of those during the winter, then we probably wouldn't do that.
Okay. This whole teacup thing, I still wanna figure out. I know it's like constrained by ODOT and crossing the street, but it's non-functional. Again, for somebody that wants to take transit so bad, it's just 2 hours to get to Teacup isn't worth it.
Cause you gotta go over to government camp and then back out.
Yeah.
Not on the second one.
Yeah, only on some of them do you have to go all the way to government camp, but you still have to go to Meadows and then come back.
Oh. Well, that's better. I'll still look up, I'll look up that time.
And the guy last year figured out the best thing to do, if you wanna ride the first one up, and you take Meadows shuttle from the main area back down to the lower lot. And you can Nordic
Walk.
from the Meadows Nordic
Yeah.
area most of the way and then walk across the highway.
Nice. I need that.
That's the pro tip.
That sounds like my scheming. Go ahead.
Yes.
That's awesome.
It's by a Meadows Pass and Nordic.
Yeah.
Yeah, I still have yet to see there. I need to get a chance.
So some additional stops that were suggested for Gorge to Mountain were sledding parks, Hood River Meadows parking lot at Mount Hood Meadows for cross-country skiers, Hood River Valley High School and trailheads. So, and we feel that adding too many additional stops to Columbia Gorge Express or Gorge to Mountain would negatively impact the services. For Columbia Gorge Express, we believe working with ODOT on a more visitor-oriented services similar to the Falls to Lock service could offer an alternative during the summer. And then for staff is recommending that together with ODOT, CAT undertake an assessment of new stops on both CGE and G2M that would look actively at which stops offer the most opportunity to meet regional needs and would foster ridership. And that's actually currently more or less in the works. ODOT is looking at a study that would allow them to look at these different mobility hubs and transit centers that would kind of serve the statewide network, transit network, which is both Columbia Gorge Express and Gorge to Mountain. Okay, so any questions on what we're proposing for these different focus groups? I know I went through them kind of quickly and it was kind of confusing, but. Okay, all right, Megan, Daryl,
No,
Yep. Oh, no questions.
all right, and so here is a slide that kind of shows the whole 10-year proposed plan of what those services would look like. This is a map that we're trying to kind of work on, and by the final plan might look a little different, just the fact it's a kind of a lot of information to put on one map. So trying to figure out the best way to show that.
And then the adoption process for this is in January?
No, it's gonna be in May. So,
Oh, it's that far out.
yes.
Okay.
So,
I
but we
thought it
still,
said in the winter of 23.
that was our original hope.
Okay.
But, or sorry, yeah, so meaning like January, February was
Yeah.
our original hope.
Okay.
However, with all the different setbacks that we experienced, it will be closer if it's in May.
Yeah.
So the next steps, or so, sorry, for the phase implementation, like I said, immediate, we are looking at preparing for growth. And that's when we're gonna do the interim City of Hood River plan. And then short-term 1 to 4 years, focus on implementation of route changes, mostly east and west, as well, or Hood River East and West, and then also the Upper Valley changes. And then 4 to 8 is focusing on community connections and hub development. And then long-term is focusing on planning for what's next. Okay, next steps. We need your approval of vision and direction. And then we are going to do draft capital plan development and then draft financing plan development. Our advisory committees are going to be reviewing this. Our TAC is March 23rd and our citizen advisory meeting is March 30th. Public review, the board will be presented a draft TMP in April. Our public hearing is May, and that gives us 1 month of buffer in case anything additional happens, because it needs to be approved by June 30th. All right.
So I should have waited for my question. Is that what you're saying?
No, we just answered it twice, right? So everybody knows. Okay, so we are now at the spot where it's open for discussion, or if you feel like you're ready to make a decision, we can go from there.
Heard from the people, right? They voted in all the different areas and using a consultant to make this, I don't.
Yeah.
I have no changes.
All right. Yeah, they voted on the different areas. We did make a couple of those changes based on just
And some of them split right down. the
staff
middle.
knowledge.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're split right down the middle, and some of the decisions were made because of operational challenges and ensuring we're serving the most and getting the most ridership.
Okay.
I'll make the motion to approve the 10-year vision.
I'll second. That
Okay, we have a second. Any further discussion? Okay, pull to a vote, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, chair votes aye. You have your 10-year vision approved. We move to the next step,
Wonderful, thank you very much.
open board positions.
Yes, so I did receive, yeah, go,
Yeah,
that's
it's
fine.
okay. Yeah,
Thank you so much.
sorry.
Thanks
Have a
for
great
staying
night.
for that.
Answers my buddy's holiday.
Thank your daughter for sticking around.
We have.
You want to do this when you're older, I know you do.
It's training.
Yeah, so Jeff Halford has submitted his official resignation.
Okay.
For January, mid-January, I think it's January 10th.
He's allowed to continue, but he's just gonna keep busy.
He is technically allowed to continue, but
He wasn't. I keep hearing mixed things.
so based from the information that I received from him, technically he could, but I think it just caused a little too much of a gray area. So we are wishing him the best and are excited to have a supporter in
Yeah.
legislature.
Which I will be using.
Okay, so what's,
So we are going to be advertising the position.
Okay.
And that'll go in the newspaper as well as social media, and we'll be accepting applications. My hope is that we will receive applications so that I can put it on your table in January to make a decision.
Okay.
So you would appoint a board member, and then in July, I believe that's when his position was open.
that need that to run?
Anyways,
Okay.
yeah, so then we would need it would go up to election.
Okay.
All right,
all right, thanks for that update. On to agenda item number 10, does any other discussion items from the board? Okay. Upcoming events. We were closed on Christmas, closed on New Year's Day.
yep, on Sunday for both of those. Otherwise, we are doing normal operations. And as just another thing to side note, as you have probably seen, we've had to cancel services here and there because of the different winter weather. But we have been doing our best to keep all riders apprised of the different changes.
All right, other than that, I need a motion for adjournment.
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Daryl. Second,
I'll second that.
any discussion? The only discussion, I apologize, I delayed this by a few minutes, I thought I had time. All right, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, any opposed? Your vote's aye. Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks for staying late.
Thank you.